Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly. I'm your host, Christopher Gallagher, and this week we have a different format to our usual panel talking about Celtic. It will just be myself with a guest, and we're going to talk about some interesting subjects. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Martin from the Green Brigade. Hello Martin, how are you, sir?
Hi Chris, I'm all good, mate. How are you?
Not too bad. Good to have you back. Martin's been on a number of times. You can go back and listen to some previous podcasts we had. And yeah, we just want to kind of get an update on everything. Green Brigade and the ban and everything. So, kind of opening question is, what is the current update regarding the Green Brigade returning to Celtic Park?
I'll try and give as broad an overview as I can, Chris. But before I go much further, I'd probably rather just acknowledge right from the off that I know for many Celtic supporters that this is kind of boring, it's tedious, it does feel kind of never ending. There's another negative story among many, many negative stories within the club and the supporter base at the minute. So we appreciate that, but also, you know, if people are struggling with it, then you can imagine what our members and other people who are banned are sort of feeling about it all. For us, it is also, as much as we understand that it can be quite tedious, it is also really important that we do get our side out there. Really appreciate the Cynic for offering us a platform and the opportunity to do that. You guys have always been very supportive and really appreciate that continued backing. It does also mean we can kind of move away from sort of statement after statement, which I know people again kind of get fatigued by. And again, I totally understand it. I'm also in a similar boat. So, you know, this opportunity today kind of allows us to sort of deliver a message in a different way, and, you know, maybe update people who are maybe wondering what's going on or what the latest is or whatever. So from our end, the sort of official line from the club and where they're at, and I'll explain what I mean by that as we go on, but the official line from Celtic is that they have another SAG Safety Advisory Group meeting. I think it's around, it might even be today, it might be tomorrow. The last we heard from them was last week, and they said there was going to be a SAG meeting at the end of the week. That's their official line, and their official line is that meeting is to go through the responses that we offered the club in an email to their sort of list of demands, which they sent to us, and Brian Wilson had sort of referred to in an interview. I should say, and this probably won't be news, we've kind of maintained throughout that the Safety Advisory Group as a sort of red herring.
Yeah.
It's become a very convenient body for the club to hide behind. And, you know, recent events have sort of indicated that as well. But we're kind of riding the bus to the next stop, if you like. But I think we all now, almost universally within the Green Brigade, kind of see where this is going. And we don't think it's positive.
Can you tell us what the club's demands were and what you kind of were happy to do?
So some were reasonable. I have noted them down. So some were reasonable, and, you know, weren't problematic at all, and others were probably deliberately difficult to accept or get on board with. So some that were reasonable, agreement to terms and conditions. We do that. Every supporter does that at point of purchase with a season ticket. So, you know, clearly there is no issue there. We agree to terms and conditions every May when we renew, and, you know, we'll agree when we hopefully get the chance to renew in May. They asked us to stay away from home matches. You'll be aware, or some people might be aware, that some members of the Green Brigade have managed to pick up tickets for home games and stand with the boys for some home matches. They asked us to refrain from doing that. So, as a sort of gesture of good faith, if you like, we stayed away from that Motherwell match a couple of weeks ago. They've also asked us to agree to a stewarding an operational plan, which again we've said, look, we agree to that as long as it's kind of proportionate, reasonable, and ideally we get sight of that. The very last thing we want to do is walk into a situation where tickets get scanned and people are criminals right away again, and we're walking people into another situation further down the line. So, in principle, we agree to that, but ideally, you know, it's not ridiculous stewarding and security operations, which are just going to cause problems further down the line. But in principle, yeah, we've said, you know, let's, you know, we're happy with that. The ones that are problematic and that we've sort of pushed back on, they asked us to stay away from away matches, which we don't think is a reasonable request. We pick up tickets through appropriate means for away matches. Me, for example, I get a ticket from a CSC. I've built a record for 20 years going to away games. If I miss matches, that impacts my ability to then pick up future matches. And many other supporters are in a similar boat to me in terms of how they pick up tickets. We also don't even think it's relevant. If their supposed concerns are around the safe operation of the North Curve, why should supporters be prevented from going and supporting the team away from home? So we sort of push back on that and sort of kind of stand firm on that. We think that that's a sort of unserious request. They also asked us to agree to the physical barriers which are in the concourse within the North Curve. People may have seen photos of these, but the sort of physical barriers have been erected that people have to go through, and then a line of stewards and ticket checks. They need to pass through this if they want to go and get a glass of water or even go to the toilet, use the gents' toilet. They need to pass through this. As a one-off, people might not think that's not really a big deal, but you can see the frustration in people when they have to do it continuously 3, 4, 5 times a game.
Yeah.
So we've asked that, can we find a common sense approach to this? Their message is that it's to prevent overcrowding. Our message back to them is, look, there must be other more progressive ways to manage this, and we've always committed for many years to work with the club on how can we mitigate that, how can we prevent that. We ultimately think that a larger area is clearly the obvious solution to that. However, obviously we feel like a million miles away from that. So we've asked for them to be removed, or at least if they feel they need to implement them, can we do it at fixtures where there is actually a remote chance of overcrowding? So, for example, Motherwell at home a couple of weeks ago, we had Livingston at home a couple of weeks before that. These aren't problematic matches. There's rarely overcrowding in the area at these matches. So can we maybe have an adult conversation where these measures are implemented for the bigger games and maybe removed for the so-called smaller games? So again, we're open to discussion and negotiation and compromise on that if need be. And finally, the other request they said is that they've asked all members within the North Curve to refrain from any anti-police messaging. So whether that be through banners, through speech, or through social media posts. So people can say what they want about anti-police and protests or whatever. It might be your bag and it might not be a thing at all. The key message is that it's not unlawful. So that it's not a serious request. People will sometimes film the police to ensure transparency, to gather evidence, to protect themselves.
Yep.
The level of trust between Celtic supporters and Police Scotland is particularly low right now. And we feel that's even more important that every conversation or engagement is documented. So we think that's a problematic and potentially puts supporters in a dangerous position if they're not allowed to record conversations. Brian Wilson alluded to the request being the same requests that apply to every Celtic supporter in every area of the stadium. That's clearly untrue.
Yeah.
Those things I've just listed are not applied to every area of the stadium. If I sat in 105, I would be allowed to record conversations with the police and document them. I can go to the toilet without going through stewarding checks and physical barriers. I can go to away matches. So that's not his message there to the Celtic supporters was not true.
Yeah.
We have just finally also asked for minutes of recent SAG meetings between the advisory group and the club. They have refused to provide the minutes. We've also asked for fan representation at these meetings. They've refused to allow fan representation at these meetings. We've asked for, in that case, an SLO to be present at these meetings, and they've refused the SLO to be present at the meetings. So as it stands now, Celtic's sole representative at the SAG meetings is Mark Hargreaves, and there's no minutes or any document as to what's been discussed at these meetings. So clearly that is leading to further suspicion. So we've requested that. We don't expect to get that. So we'll see what comes of their response, which we'll hopefully get over the next few days.
A lot of the kind of, Brian Wilson's comments about the ball kind of being in the Green Brigade's court, it's the PR that Celtic tend to do is very much, they just have to agree to certain demands and that's it. And then they don't go into detail. But when it's laid out like that, people must realise that the club are at it.
Well, listen, I don't know how much Brian Wilson's actually immersed in this stuff, to be honest. There was certain things about the video which were, I would say, disingenuous. He released a video, and the suggestion was that SAG had met weeks prior, and the messages were then relayed to the Green Brigade immediately after. That wasn't the case. SAG had met, and then 2.5 weeks later, those messages were given to the Green Brigade. We asked, why did you sit in this for so long? Why didn't you just tell us? They said that they were waiting on official minutes, which just seems nonsense to me. So they delivered the message. They finally delivered the message from that SAG meeting 2.5 weeks later. So that was on the Monday or the Tuesday to us, and Brian Wilson released the video through Celtic's club channels, I think the Wednesday or the Thursday.
Yeah.
So at that point when he said the ball was in our court, technically he was probably right, but they'd only gave us that information for a day or two. We've obviously then got to consult members and discuss ourselves, which we did almost immediately. We convened a very quick meeting and then went back to him very, very quickly in good time. So the ball, this ball that Brian's speaking about is very much now in their court. We don't think that any of our requests are in any way unreasonable. So we'll see what they come back with. The noises coming out the club, sort of off the record, are not positive. They don't think that what we've asked for is going to wash. But to be honest, we think there's something else at play here, and that the ban isn't going to be lifted regardless.
Well, that's what I was kind of going to ask in regard to, does it feel, I mean, obviously it does, you've kind of just alluded to there, but it feels like this is more than a set of demands that need to be met. It feels like, as a supporter, I'm not obviously part of the Green Brigade, but huge fan of like the atmosphere and everything you do, which we've made clear. But does it feel personal? Does it feel like they're just out to close the whole thing down?
Certainly feels personal for me, because I'm allegedly one of the problems, given a recent conversation, which I'm sure we can touch on later on. But it does definitely feel, certainly over recent weeks, it feels like this is only headed one way. I've tried to remain upbeat and more positive, and in a way, I've probably been made to look quite foolish for that. I'm always one of the ones who's sort of cajoling people into, saying that, I think this can be rectified. Let's go and meet. Let's go and hear them out. Let's go and, try and reach a conclusion here. Whereas others who are maybe more cynical and have perhaps been proven to be right, I've said, look, this is only going one way, and we're kind of delaying the inevitable here. I've always sort of maintained that we can find a way to get the Green Brigade back in an off curve before the end of the season. But as every day passes, every conversation takes place, I've become less and less sure of that, and indeed now I'm not resigned to it, but I'm expecting that we won't be back in the off curve for a long time actually, which is a real shame. But that I think that ultimately it's out of our control. There's an important thing that maybe you can't pick up. It's just almost the general tone in the conversations, which are hard to kind of relay through statements and even through podcasts.
Yeah,
there is, in fact, it's been explicitly said, there is no room for negotiation. I'm quoting somebody who from Celtic who said that. So there is no sort of adult conversation to be had here. There is no compromise. There is no sort of give and go. It is very much their way or the highway, and we don't think that they are taking a serious position, and they actually do want us back. Brian Wilson has said a couple of times, when he said it in a statement following the Stuttgart home match, and said it in the video that he released, that was talking about at following Ibrox, that he would like the Green Brigade to return. I actually don't doubt Brian's sincerity on that. I've found him kind of genuine, found him one of the guys in there who calls a spade a spade. And I think he does. He's almost quite famous now for pleading for unity. And I actually do. I don't know what others who've met him think, but I actually do think he's serious in that. I think he does want unity. However, what I would also say is it became quite clear after meeting him that he doesn't hold much influence there. He's probably just passed on information he's getting from upstairs from guys who are now unwilling to meet us. And he's sort of passing on their messages essentially. And unfortunately, I just don't think he holds the sway. He's interim chairman, but I don't think he's calling the shots. I think the people calling the shots are Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay, Mark Hargreaves, George Campbell, and there's probably some significant influence from the Desmond family as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Obviously, you mentioned Mark Hargreaves there. He's obviously ex-police. Is that? Do you think that's where the whole, stop the anti-police stuff is kind of ingrained in what he's coming across with? Because you can't stop someone saying, "I don't like the police."
Yeah. It's not a serious request. Let's be honest. It's not anything that anybody. I don't think anybody could accept that. Never mind an ultras group.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that. I mean, Mark Harvey's been the sole Celtic representative at these meetings for weeks, months. There's been an uneasy relationship from the start. Mark Hargreaves comes to a senior position at Police Scotland for the last sort of 10, 15 years. Within that role, he was heavily involved in policing football fans, and actually, in some cases, there was history there with policing the Green Brigade. At that time, as Mark Hargreaves climbed the ladder, there was kind of infamous offensive behaviour at Football Act.
Yeah.
The remnants of that sort of culture within the police, they still live on to this day. We still very much see that every day. You don't just turn that culture off like a tap. And Mark Hargreaves and some 7 officers lived through that and probably still harbour a lot of these feelings towards supporters, either consciously or subconsciously. So these were all concerns that we had when we heard of the appointment in the summer. The concerns were obviously laid bare following the Falkirk match, which has sort of kicked this off. The accusations that flew around after that were quite disgraceful. The tone of the statement that released was unprecedented. It was a really shocking attack on supporters firstly, but the Green Brigade was definitely the kind of main target of that. They were very unequivocal. The words choice, things like violently assaulted police, violently assaulted stewards. Even the timing of the release, it was released, I think, at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. It was timed in conjunction with a statement from Police Scotland.
Yeah.
That gives serious concerns around the motives, serious concerns around the tone, and how it was all sort of done. And a few weeks later, after that, we had the throwback to the sort of aforementioned offensive behaviour days when supporters were dawn raided, doors were put in, families were left sort of shaken up, supporters' lives turned upside down. And for what? An alleged breach of the peace charges. And that also then leads us to, the next accusation, which is at the Celtic AGM. The Celtic AGM just so happened to be 24 hours after those doors had just been put in. And, myself and somebody else passed Mark Hargreaves at the AGM. So we questioned his involvement in recent statements, the tone of recent statements. Was it emotional? Yes. Was it a heated conversation? Yes. Was it a difficult conversation at times? Yes. Was the timing maybe well ill-advised? Should it maybe have been left to another day? Maybe. But, ultimately we're no robots. I defy anybody to walk by and not say anything. But what it never was threatening. And obviously from there, accusations have been levelled at myself and other people that we've threatened an ex-senior police officer, which would just be fucking crazy, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I probably went off at a tangent a wee bit, but where we're at now is Mark Hargreaves kind of managed to manufacture a profile. It's almost kind of unheard of for a guy in this position. Ronnie Hawthorne was at Celtic for decades, and he had some sort of profile, was relatively well known, but many people probably couldn't even recognise him or know much about what he's done. Mark Hargreaves, in the sort of 8, 9 months that he's been at Celtic, has become a kind of unpopular figure and has been seen by many fans as one of the big problems. And when you lose the trust of the Celtic fans, it's very difficult to stay in a position. You might cling on, and we've seen that, and we're currently seeing that in other areas of the club. But it makes it difficult for you to sustain that role, and that becomes even more problematic when you're the person responsible for the safety of supporters.
Yeah.
If fans don't ultimately trust the guy or the person leading the safety operations, that becomes a serious problem. So Mark Hargreaves has had the opportunity to pick up the phone to me or other people in the Green Brigade. He's had the opportunity to come and sit in these meetings, because that is his role. Ronnie Hawthorne would sit in these meetings and would play an active role in conversations. He could have sat in these meetings, we could have shook hands like adults with a view to sort of mending relations. Doesn't have to like me. I don't need to like him. We just need to be able to communicate with the members and supporters, and he's refused to do that. So to my knowledge, he's not actually sat in any of the fan meetings that have taken place over recent weeks and months. So that includes the collective affiliation, CSA, Green Brigade. He's not been there. He's not been visible at stadiums. If he's not going to speak to supporters, then it is a problem.
It's kind of his job to be at these
Yeah.
meetings. Like,
Yeah, especially if you're going to play such an active part in, banning fans and, this collective punishment tactic that they've taken and whatever. You surely need to be able to communicate with other supporters at least and tell them the thinking behind that. But the only time he's seen is when he's sitting in the director's box.
yeah. And obviously, recently, the game at Ibrox, there was issues before getting in. So what I'm kind of want to make the point is that the safety of the yourselves and the group and just other supporters, having a phone and being able to film heavy-handed policing is a defensive stance, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, our friend Barry was at the game at Ibrox, and he said getting in was an absolute nightmare. Like, the policing was just inappropriate and not kind of handled well. What's your kind of memories of that?
I mean, I'll back up Barry and what he said. I'm went to Ibrox. Had a lot of fun at Ibrox for many years when it was a full broom on, and anybody who went there regularly will know that there was very, very little issues with access. So very little in the way of sort of events or any sort of talking points. A lot of times you wouldn't see any Rangers supporters till you actually went through into the stadium. So why they tore that policing plan up remains to be seen. I've not heard any legitimate explanation or reasonable explanation as to why that happened. I was there very early. It became really, really early. It became obvious, really, really obvious, very early in proceedings that there was an issue outside. That, as time ticked on, supporters were going to start looking at the watches, looking at being close to kick-off. People were naturally going to arrive at that sort of window, sort of half an hour, 40 minutes before kick-off, and to try and get through an extremely tight lane, which was previously been used for 800 supporters. Now it was getting used for 8,000.
Yeah.
Now, whether it was deliberate, cynics will say it was, because they've ultimately probably got what they've wanted and that this will never happen again, likely.
Yeah.
Or whether it was just, plain incompetence. I don't know. I wouldn't know. Only the people who organised it will be able to answer that. But you're right. There needs to be an inquiry, and what will be critical to that inquiry will be the footage that supporters have taken. So to ask fans to not film in certain situations is irresponsible. So listen, there needs to be an inquiry. Celtic, for me, Celtic should be speaking to supporters now, telling us what input they had into the organisation. What did they know? Did they raise concerns? How was that done? If there's criticism of police, let's actually do it. This comes at a time where we've just passed 12 months since 100 or so football supporters were kettled on London Road. To this day, Celtic have not taken a position on that, which is utterly shameful.
Yeah.
So taking a position on this won't make up for that, but at least might show some willing that they can defend supporters and ensure that doesn't happen again. Yeah, I won't hold my breath on that.
Obviously, after the game and all that and everything that happened, and we're not going to go into the media kind of fallout from it, but the police fallout, they're as bad as each other, and this is why we can't do this again, and we can't have 8,000. We can't ever do that. Talking about like that wasn't the kind of allocation like 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Like,
listen, it was entirely predictable. I knew as I stood watching it happen that this is just going to be fucking tedious news headlines for the weeks to come, and it's going to be big bad football fans and all the rest of it. But what's probably an important point that I've not kind of mentioned, and I'll make absolutely clear before I make the point, I don't want to see any fan or fan group, regardless of the colours, banned. I don't. There is other ways of engaging with supporters than banning them. But what has become pretty obvious, or what we understand to be the case, is that reports of the last few weeks are that this aforementioned safety advisory group have asked Rangers to ban supporters for what happened on the pitch that day. And Rangers, rightly, I don't like giving them any credit, but Rangers have rightly said that any banning of supporters is our decision.
Yeah.
that stance completely flies in the face of what Celtic are not only telling us, but I've told supporters through the video released a few weeks ago. Brian Wilson, I think we're quoting him, when he said, "This is not a unilateral decision." Well, actually it is. Actually it is. The ban was imposed by Celtic FC solely, and the ban can be lifted by Celtic FC. They're just choosing not to.
I think that, you sent me a message about that the other week about the fact that Rangers have just went, no, we're not going to ban them. It puts everything in context of what Celtic are out to do. You mentioned the fact that someone has told you within the club that there's no room for negotiation. They're not having these conversations. They're not having these meetings in good faith, are they? It's all
no. That's I mean, that's a very good way to put it. And somebody put it yesterday in a message to me. They're not a good faith player here. To my mind now, we've almost kind of wasted our time by sort of entertaining this. There was a Monday morning meeting because Brian Wilson had to shoot off that people have taken half days for, and I'm self-employed, so I don't get paid for that. There's been meetings at night time, away from families and stuff like that. And actually, on reflection, we've achieved nothing. All it's done is just to almost sort of dance to their tune, so they can tell supporters and tell whoever that they're engaging. And probably when they eventually reach the conclusion that the Green Brigade won't be permitted back into the North Curve, they can say they tried. And then that's essentially the whole purpose behind that. That's as far as I can see it.
You just want to watch Celtic. You just want to support Celtic, and that's the kind of something that's lost. And a lot of this, that you are just supporters, just like everyone else who just wants to support the club. That's something that needs to be consistently kind of told to the public.
Well, there's two facets to this, right? So there was the original people who were so unlucky to have been plucked out of almost thin air. The 5 people who were chosen to be the problems around the Falkirk match. All right. So not only did they have their doors kicked in, and relationships troubled, and families upset, and issues with jobs and all that sort of stuff, names in the paper, time off work for court. The other side that people don't see is that those 5 people, for every match Celtic played for 3 months, they have to go to the police station at 3 o'clock. When this first happened, the police told them they'd never seen anything like this. The people who were working at the desk, they've never seen conditions like this imposed on supporters for such nonsense accusations. So every Celtic match, they had to go to a police station at 3 o'clock, sit there for 45 minutes, allowed out at half time for a drink of water and a bit of fresh air, and back again for the second half. So when you think of the time of that, so that is around the Christmas period when you have 3 games a week.
Yep.
You're doing that every Saturday afternoon or every Sunday afternoon, or sometimes at night time when you've been working all day. I was speaking to a boy yesterday who's got a 1-year-old in his house. So if it was a Wednesday, Celtic, or Thursday, sorry, because we fucked it. It was a Thursday. He's working all day. He's got a 1-year-old in the house, and he's finishing work to go straight to a police station. He sit there for hours until full time in a Celtic game, and then let go. Or if it's a Saturday or Sunday, he's been working all week and he's got time off with his wee one. He'll never be that age ever again, obviously. And he's missing almost a full afternoon. So there's that impact. Thankfully, at the first court date, the judge looked at that and by all accounts was astounded that those were imposed. And the impact that has on people, I don't think can be underplayed. But there is also the wider impact. You touched on people just want to go see Celtic. Celtic, for many people, and probably too much for me, it's many people's lives.
Yeah.
Being able to go and see Celtic, support Celtic, is what keeps them ticking over Monday to Friday. For many, they turn on 50 people suspended, who are, by the way, a lot of them are no members of the Green Brigade. I think probably the majority, aren't they? They've maybe getting themselves into sort of financial hardship to afford a season ticket. Many might be students, maybe might be minimum wage. Many might have families to provide for. Maybe some will have taken on sort of extra work, or maybe even borrowed to pay for it. They've got that season ticket in the summer last year in good faith, and it's effectively been stolen for them. And why? To protect the reputations of a select few millionaires and probably even a couple of billionaires.
Yep. Yep.
Football's the core. It's the core of some people's social lives. Like for some fans, it's like their release. It's their opportunity maybe to think about something else, or they're troubled for 90 minutes, an opportunity maybe to socialise, communicate, maybe even feel a part of something, to not be isolated. But there is a core of supporters who have managed to kind of keep that going, congregating with boys. If anybody who's been at Celtic games knows it's no 250. There is only a fraction of that have actually still been going. There's others who haven't been going, who are no part of that. They've had one of the biggest things taken in their life for them, and they've done absolutely fuck all wrong.
Yep.
That's maybe the bits that can't be articulated in statements and people don't see.
Yeah.
That's the kind of real life hardships that people are going through, and it's on the hands of Michael Nixon, Chris Mackay, the Desmonds, Mark Hargreaves, and George Campbell. Only they can fix it. They're the ones who've created this, and only they can fix it.
Yeah. Powerful, really powerful, man. In terms of where we go from here, as you mentioned, there's not too many home games left. Someone said, we got a question which I think kind of is quite a good one. This came from Lyle. He said, with there being no breakthrough in discussions with the board, how does Martin think this will look or impact season ticket renewals? Do you think it'll have an impact?
To be frank, no, I don't actually. I think people will have a difficult conversation this summer to be had, or a difficult decision to make. Just generally, Celtic fans will, because of how we've been treated over the last year, and with no real signs of that changing. I think that there will be, it maybe be more difficult than maybe it has been to renew. But I think this figures are something like 99.6% of people are typically renewing, like every season. I don't see that number might be less, but I just feel like there'll be plenty willing to snap it up. How it will play out for us, I genuinely don't know. Like, if you asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have been confident that we would have been back for the Motherwell game. And I said at the time, if we're not back for the Motherwell game, I think we're probably banned for the foreseeable. Not only will we not back for the Motherwell game, but it just feels like the tone isn't shifting, and it was very much a doubling down from the club. Results aren't, every time we have a shit performance or a shit result, conversations happening, maybe they'll get the Green Brigade back in to help. Results are clearly no moving the dial here.
No.
Win, lose or draw, nothing's changing. So it feels like this will be long term. I don't think it'll impact renewals too much. I think people will probably grudgingly renew. But I don't see it impact renewals. I don't even know what will happen with our renewals. Like, we don't know, are they just going to not allow 250 people to renew? Are they going to sell their seats onto the waiting list? Are they going to disperse supporters around the stadium? We don't know. So that's conversations that we're having in terms of what do we do, how do we manage it, but they've gave nothing away on that front. One thing that we could potentially do is we are sort of registered as a group within the ticket office, as like a Green Brigade group, the same way that CSCs are all over Scotland and Ireland. That's how effectively they've banned us, because they've just got all the codes that are lumped in with that group and just taken a match to essentially and banned them all. We could feasibly look at just demolishing that list and just demolishing the official Green Brigade list within the ticket office, and that then puts them in a position, because then what do they do? Like, how can they tell who's Green Brigade and who's not?
Yeah.
These are just conversations to be had now that we're only starting to have, because the renewals are now very much upon us, but we have zero idea what they're going to do and how they're going to manage it.
Do you think ultimately, obviously it's affected the Green Brigade, do you think they'll look at like the boys or any other kind of groups that come from, that are developed?
I wouldn't speak for the boys, but I would imagine they're having conversations with themselves, thinking that we'll be next. It's obviously an attack on this way of supporting Celtic. They don't like that sort of togetherness, maybe the politicised, organised, largely working class male group. They've came for us. They've tried to dismantle us. I think, and I'm only speaking personally, that if personnel stay in the roles they're in just now, it is only a matter of time. It is only a matter of time. And after that, they'll then turn their attention to away supporters. They wouldn't have enjoyed the being under the microscope on Sunday, for example.
Yeah.
There is a huge swathe of supporters who want to go away from home. They won't like the like the CSC culture. They've already tried to dismantle that, and it will only be a matter of time before they turn their attention to that as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's people listening to this who will think, it'll never affect me and stuff like that. But they clearly go through social media. They clearly listen to, podcasts and fan media. Obviously, fan media is banned from Celtic Park. But how long does it go before it starts to affect a standard fan, an individual fan? In my opinion, I don't think it'll be that long.
Yeah. Well, I asked George Campbell and Brian Wilson, if this was your family, would you be happy with how they're treated? And just get blank looks back, essentially. So I think that probably says a lot. What the message for me is I don't think I'm not here to sit and preach that the Green Brigade are angels, because clearly there's been mistakes made, they've crossed the lines. Many times they've sort of held their hands up to that. Only recently there was a ban for the semi-final at Hampden against Rangers, and the Green Brigade were banned because of use of pyrotechnics. Grudgingly accepted that ban. They never went to the game because essentially the Green Brigade held their hands up to having utilised the pyro and taking the sort of punishment on the chin, if you like. So there's a track record there of accepting what comes our way. But what's happened over recent months has been, I was going to say maybe, but it's been absolutely 100% the most disgraceful treatment. A collection of supporters, and I stress it's not just the Green Brigade, there's not just Green Brigade members that are banned here. It's been the most disgraceful treatment of supporters that I've seen in Scotland in my life.
And it doesn't feel like it's going to let up either, does it? It feels like they are going to double down.
No, well, they're proving themselves to be vindictive. The position they're taking is a vindictive position. I'll draw an example. I'm conscious of time, but I'll draw an example. So this year, we hoped to have been made a kind of celebration. It had been 20 years of Green Brigade this year, and that should, and is a big deal. Certainly is a big deal internally. And over the coming week, we've got many sort of friends and guests over from various clubs across Europe to come and celebrate with us. And a simple request was asked of the SLO on Sunday. Could we get in and take the guests in to show them around the North Curve, get some pictures taken in the North Curve, get some pictures taken at the murals that we painted a few years ago, which obviously we're really proud of. And can we show them that section? Obviously we can't get it again, but can we show them in? And SLO agreed that he would come in with us and show us around for 10 minutes and get a picture in the section and stuff like that. But the request went to Mark Hargreaves and Michael Nicholson and came back yesterday. No, they're not allowed in. So not only is that, we think, vindictive, because it's never been an issue in the past, it's also embarrassing because we then need to take these supporters who, for all over Europe, and tell them that we can't get in to our own section and we'll get a picture outside instead. These supporters are used to like a far more progressive, positive relationship with their club. When we turn around and tell them we can't get a picture taken inside, it's honestly it's embarrassing for us, but it's embarrassing for Celtic.
Yeah.
But it just kind of speaks to the level of vindictiveness that we're dealing with at the minute.
Yeah, I can agree more. In terms of, I just want to get a brief kind of thought on the collective, because you're part of the Celtic collective, which is, and it's still kind of growing and developing, but a huge thing for the future of the club, I think, or the support. Any kind of final thoughts on just where the Green Brigade sit?
People are probably naturally thinking, the collective's taking a dip and there's been a dip in momentum and all that, and I suppose there is an element of truth to that, but hopefully people also understand that you are kind of dictated to by results a wee bit. We had arguably a good run of results there in those away matches, so naturally, your match day disruptions and boycotts and protests are kind of off the table. There will be some who want to continue them, but largely people understand the position the team's in, and so kind of match day protests are probably not going to be seen as popular. But that doesn't mean to say things have ground to a halt. There is a lot happening. Sounds a bit wanky, but there is a lot happening sort of behind the scenes. The steering group have taken the time to improve like admin processes.
Yeah.
They're now drawing up different structural ideas that can make the collective more sustainable. There's obviously a conversation to be had around season ticket renewals and Hope Cup ticket scheme registrations, and obviously there's the ongoing ban on the Green Brigade and fan media. So all that sort of stuff is still getting discussed, and there is a meeting next week with the wider collective to discuss and take forward anything that needs to be taken forward. There is also a discussion around the sort of fan advisory board. So again, members of the collective are looking at what that could look like to make sure that essentially fans are consulted if that is ever implemented at Celtic, because I don't think anybody's got faith in Celtic FC implementing a fan advisory board that will actually hold them to account. So, the collective are obviously taking the position that if that ever does come to pass, then we absolutely need to be at the forefront of that and making sure that anything that is introduced at Celtic has to be workable for supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Final thoughts on everything? Final thoughts on where we are?
Sorry to bring the tone down, and I'd love to come back on one day and talk about something fucking positive for a change. Now, listen, I do appreciate people listening, and I said at the start, I do appreciate it's tiring, tedious. I myself, I'm fucking so fatigued by it. Like, I've been home and away with Celtic since I was a young boy. This has been comfortably the worst few months. That's probably not a surprise to anybody, but it has been comfortably the worst few months I've had as a Celtic fan. I'm hoping for a positive conclusion, but I fear the worst.
Unfortunately, I'd do the same. But Martin, an absolute pleasure as always. Thanks for getting involved on it, sir, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Lovely stuff. From Martin, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly, and we'll speak to you down the road.